Hi, and welcome to the 10th episode of the Inside the Orange podcast. The podcast all about understanding the people around us. The idea of today's episode is all about the journey employees go through in your business. And I'll also be comparing that employee to Cristiano Ronaldo's journey from prospect to superstar. This is the Inside the Orange podcast with the perfect employee. Let's get into the episode. So before I go any further today, I'd just like to say a huge thanks to all the people that listened to last week's episode with David Donnelly. And I'd like to say a massive thank you to him for coming on the show and giving such an amazingly open and honest interview about his past and his battles with mental health and addiction. And also the changes he made in his life in order to be optimistic about his future. If you haven't heard this episode, there will be a link in the description for you to go and find it. So today's episode is about the perfect employee. And I'm going to use a theory that was made about something called the product lifecycle. Now, the product lifecycle was a theory that was brought into life by Raymond Vernon in 1966. And I just want to clarify that at no point am I referring to people as products, but I think there's a lot in the theory that can be likened to an employee's journey through a business. So the four key stages we're looking at are introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. Now, I said at the top of the episode that I'm also going to be talking about Cristiano Ronaldo and his journey from prospect to superstar. The reason I'm going to do that is I believe that Cristiano Ronaldo, being a global figure, also went through 4 clubs in his career that he continues to have at an amazing age of 35, and how you can liken these points in his career to these 4 stages of the life cycle. So we'll talk the first one through, which is introduction. So in terms of introduction, I would say this is when someone comes off the street. So the minute they come into your business and are introduced or inducted into your business and what they need to do. So they go through stages of learning the job, of making mistakes, of not being the finished article, but hopefully there is something in them where you can see there is the potential to mould into something that's going to go on. This is what I'd like to liken to Cristiano Ronaldo's first team in Sporting Lisbon. Now, at Sporting Lisbon, he was a prospect. He was a young, skillful winger. But he wouldn't have been the finished product that we see today. He would have been allowed to make mistakes, and he would have been introduced slowly into the game of football to make sure that he understood the game, understood what was needed from the team, and understood his role of what he needed to bring to the team. And I think that's so important when you bring people into your business that you don't automatically think, yeah, they've got it. There you go. You can do it on your own, mate. You know this role. You do need to make sure you're around them enough. And this process can take ages. This process can take a while because you're training someone that yesterday or a week ago or a month ago didn't know anything about what you're asking them to do on a day-to-day basis. Now, this does vary from football because I've got no doubt that Cristiano Ronaldo was a very good footballer outside. But he'd have had to understand the disciplines of what that meant. Now, I know that Sporting Lisbon would have known that he wasn't going to be at that club forever. Now, this is where it can be different from a business. Businesses want to keep hold of their best people. So there is a massive difference here of Sporting Lisbon not turning around after 5 minutes with Ronaldo and going, well, he's not going to be here forever, so we're not going to coach him. He's obviously going to go on to better things. There isn't that philosophy, but sometimes if we had someone in our team that we thought isn't going to be around for long because they're going to do anything, would we give them that same kind of naive approach? Would we say, oh well, they're not going to be around forever, so no? We wouldn't, because our expectation is that we want to teach people how to be the best in our business. So inevitably, Cristiano Ronaldo moved on, and he was signed for Manchester United. This would have been his growth period, his improvement period. So he was no doubt a prospect as he left Sporting Lisbon. But joining Manchester United, he was still relatively unknown. He was this guy that, yeah, okay, you might have seen a little bit of him in Europe. You know, I know that he was signed by Manchester United based on a pre-season friendly, I believe, that, you know, he was able to showcase his skills. But he was still able to be trained by Manchester United, to be disciplined by Manchester United, to be brought into the game by the coaching staff and notably Sir Alex Ferguson. So, again, I revert back to the first point where, did Manchester United think they had this guy for the rest of their life? Or, sorry, for the rest of his career? Knowing the level that Manchester United were at the time, yeah, I think they might have thought, do you know what, if we get him right, if we put enough effort into him, he will never want to leave. But knowing how short football careers are and knowing how big the world of global football is, it was still a risk. It was still something that they would have had to think, well, there is the risk that we could make him an absolute superstar and he could leave. But again, they coached the best out of him. They got the best out of him. And again, I watched early games of him at Manchester United, and I remember him, you know, doing these tricks, and you wanted him to fall flat on his face because you thought this was a bit disrespectful, this young lad coming in and doing all these tricks and pieces. But by the time around 2006-07, I was lucky to go and watch him in a game, and I just sat there and was just amazed at just how good this guy was. He was someone that tore my team apart. It was an FA Cup semi-final, I remember, at Aston Villa, at Villa Park. And it was just amazing as an opposition fan to watch this guy do what he did on the day. And it's terrible to say that as a fan, that you support a team that was just literally torn apart by this guy. But these moments where you see these people is only very short and fleeting. But how does that work with business? So we see these people that you look at one day and you go, do you know what, they've got something. They are improving. I think they could be promoted. I think they could go on and do a bigger job. And again, what we do sometimes is we do let people go on to do those bigger jobs. And we always have a doubt in our minds that maybe it's going to be a bridge too far. And this is the thing. Sporting Lisbon to Manchester United, this was a well-known team. We do feel sometimes that actually, yeah, this might be that change just a bit too early. But it's not like at this point of improvement that we should turn around and say they don't need anything else from us. This is where it becomes important that although we see if I liken the first one to the rough diamond, this is slightly more polished. This is a slightly more polished diamond. We kind of go towards these people and think, yeah, they need it, but they don't need much off. They've got this. They know what they're doing. And again, that was the risk that you have with Manchester United with Cristiano Ronaldo. Oh, he's good enough. We can't make him any better. Well, no, you can. And businesses can. But sometimes I believe that businesses just think, yeah, we'll give them the training and let them go. And yeah, they'll either get it or they'll either sink or they'll swim. And I think to myself, and I've seen this. I've seen people get to that point and hit their glass ceiling because the support isn't there, because they've just naturally assumed that they should get it by this point. Now, I'll move on to the next point, which is the maturity. So again, I'm doing this in football moves. So I'm thinking now about Cristiano Ronaldo when he moved to Real Madrid. Now, what I like about this is you can promote someone to do this job. And you can promote the person to do the level of the job that the last person didn't do. Now, one of the greatest things I remember about Cristiano Ronaldo's move from Manchester United to Real Madrid was that he wasn't going in as number 7. So the difference was, when he joined Manchester United, he was burdened with this number 7 shirt of Best, of Beckham, and he was given this 7 shirt, and he liked the number 7 shirt. So he went to Real Madrid. The trouble with Real Madrid was they had a number 7, and he was a club icon. So you were never going to be able to replace this guy, because this guy, Raul, who it was at the time, is number 7. So this is a bit of a crossroads for Cristiano Ronaldo, and I believe this is why maturity or peak is such a good word for it. Now, he could have gone in and said, well, I'm number 7, so what? He didn't. He went and worked hard. So again, there's a lesson here for an employee. If you get given this dream move, don't just think you've got it and you don't have to work any harder for it because you're there. You don't, because you are still having to create your own icon. You're still going to be, there would still be comparisons in the early days, even though they were different positions, but there was early days comparisons between Raul and Ronaldo. And Ronaldo was not going to be Raul. Now, if you fast forward 10 years to Real Madrid, this next level of person would have not, or would have been able to be, or been emulated against Cristiano Ronaldo. So, what this means for an employee, like I said, you could get to that point where they're at their absolute peak, they're at their absolute growth of the game, or growth of their job, and they are doing all they can be doing to be the next level. And you put them into this next level. And like I said, they need to be able to perform to the level that is themselves. Now that sounds so confusing, but you aren't out there to emulate anyone else other than the best version of you. You are not out there to create the next last person that had the job. You are out there to create the first of you. Now, people in this place, people in businesses will always tell you this is how we'd like you to do it. But try and bring your own kind of element to it. Hang on a minute. You either let someone go and do it by how they want to do it, or you tell them that this is how they must do it. I don't think they can be done simultaneously. I think if you employ someone to do the best job that they can. When they reach this maturity, when they reach this peak, this is the best you will ever have this person. Now, this goes in stages. So again, remember, when you are doing this job, when you first get to a promotion, you go back to early days again. You go back to learning everything that you've done at that point. You then learn to grow into the job. You then improve in the job. And then you hit that peak again. So this cycle will continue to go round as long as you're in work. But it will be at different stages. So this point here might be the peak that you hit in a job, and it might be after 7 years. But you need to hit the peak of that part of the job again, which might be 10 years. I know this sounds so confusing, but the best thing about the life cycle is it just continues to go round. It continues to keep moving. And what makes it interesting is you will always be on a part of it, and you might even be on more than one part of it. Like I said, new to a role, established. New to a job, established. You can be in a job for a long time and get a brand new role, and then you go back to introduction again. You go back to the early days. And businesses need to understand that. The last part of it that is important is the decline. Now, that isn't to be confused with people who are brand destroyers or dissatisfied in their job. Okay? This is people that they were at their peak. You know when they were at their best. Now, people can leave jobs, and this would be a state of decline. If someone is leaving, you know you have had their best. Doesn't necessarily mean that they are not going to be great people for your business any longer. It doesn't mean that they are going to destroy everything they've done over the few years, but you have got them winding down. You've got them past their peak. Now, in a career, this can take years. You might not see a decline for 30 years. You might not see a decline for 20 years or 10 years. You might not see it. But it will happen once that person is past their peak. Now, obviously, it's really easy to see in football. It's really easy to see in football because normally decline happens in the later years of clubs. So the club I would put Cristiano Ronaldo's decline in is Juventus. Now, I do not for a minute believe he is not an amazing player for that football team. He is. But if I was to put him against 22-year-old Ronaldo, 27-year-old Ronaldo, would he be as good? And this is where we go back round again, the decline. The decline doesn't mean you aren't good anymore. The decline doesn't mean that you aren't able to do your job. The decline doesn't mean that you are going to go out and destroy everything you've done in the past. But it won't be the best work you've ever done. And it might not be that your heart's fully in it anymore. There's nothing wrong with that. I've had jobs where they've had the best of me and they've had the worst of me. And I've had jobs where I was leaving, so what did it matter? Nah. I've had jobs where I will give everything I can until I walk out that building, because you never know when that next introduction will be. And sometimes that next introduction will be to the same job or the same company or the same brand that you've left 5 years ago. It's not uncommon. People go back to where they've worked before. So why would you not want to give yourself the best day one from being able to walk back in and people already know just how good you could be? Now, if any of this has left you confused, scratching your head or going, I don't know what he's been talking about for the last however long, then that's fine. Get in touch. Talk to me. The idea of these podcasts are to make questions, to make conversations happen. And a lot of these concepts are things that I've thought about. And if I feel they could help someone who's had to think about business and had to think about leadership and had to think about their work in life in a simple way, this has helped me understand it. That there is a link, in my opinion, between the product life cycle by Vernon and people's job life cycle. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, get in touch, and bring the conversation to me. My social links will be at the end, but please, like, comment, whatever you need to do to ask that question or how to clarify that in your own mind, what I've talked about today. Now, on next week's show, I'm delighted to announce that former Watford and Brentford FC goalkeeper Richard Lee will be talking to us. And this was following my mistakes episode. I'll leave the link in the description to that. And I spoke to Richard about what defines a goalkeeper in the game of football. And we talked about various bits and pieces of the game of football that I think are so important to understanding people, not just in football, but in life in general, and about understanding and defining the mistakes. That's next week, and I look forward to putting that episode out and hearing your views on it, as always. But for today, that's it on The Perfect Employee, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode. If this podcast is something you enjoy, then please subscribe to the podcasts and make sure you like and share so more people can hear our message. Remember, if you have any questions for me or my guests, you can get in touch via our website, insidetheorange.co.uk, on Twitter @OrangeWatts, on Instagram @InsideTheOrange, or on Facebook on the Inside the Orange podcast. And finally, there's the email of insidethisorange@gmail.com. All these links will be available in the description. Thanks for listening. Goodbye and take care.